namaskar and good morning to one and all present over there. A very good morning to my teacher, Professor Pradhan, who is chairing this session. I'm really glad that I'm speaking, presenting my paper when he is the chair of this session. I sincerely apologize for not being able to join the conference in person due to my personal, so due to these problems I could not join, and I feel at loss for missing the company of such enlightened gathering actually. Let me begin with thanking the organizers and the sponsoring agency for the sponsoring agency of the conference for giving me the opportunity to share my views here. As already Madam gave an introduction, very generous introduction, thank you for that, ma'am. And the title of my talk, presentation already has been shared by Madam. I will be speaking on nation, religion and coloniality, understanding the role of Hinduism in shaping India as a nation. Shall I begin, sir?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, please.
Okay, thank you. Though colonialism has been in the center of the discourse on understanding the concept of a nation, the idea of nation was never new to India. The first mention of the term Rashtra, which is synonymous with state or nation, can be found in the oldest Indian text, the Rig Veda, where speech proclaims to be the nation or state. This paper intends to disentangle the emergence of contemporary India from the shackles of colonial rule, simultaneously looking at the forces that directly contributed to the shaping of India as nation in the modern sense of the term. The paper primarily discusses about the role or contribution of the 19th, 20th century philosophers, Hindu reformers and philosophers in recalibration of colonized India as contemporary or new India, where tolerance towards others' opinions and religions has mainly been instilled to make it more advanced and efficient as ancient India was. I do not mean to say here that the contributions of the thinkers and reformers from other religions were not there. Instead, I have tried to emphasize here that many nationalists have openly been inviting people from varied religions to contribute to the cause of national interest. Talking about the vision of the new nationalism, Sri Aurobindo says, I'm quoting him, the new overleaps every barrier. It calls to the clerk at his counter, the trader in his shop, the peasant at his plough. Its eyes searches the jungle for the santal and travels the hills for the wild tribes of the mountains. To the Hindu, it repeats the name of Kali. To the Mohammedan, it spurs to action for the glory of Islam. It cries to all to come forth to help in God's work and remake a nation, each with what his creed or his culture, his strength, his manhood or his genius can give to the new nationality. This is excerpted from reading Sri Aurobindo, this book edited by Gautam Chikarmane and David Ganguly. So here we can see that Aurobindo links nationalism strongly with religion to appeal to the nationalists to consider the nationality as God's work. Connection of nation and nationalism in India can never be disentangled from religion. Colonial forces were all nationalism in India, due to the fact that the first and foremost aim of nationalism was to assert the freedom of the country, the nation. It was the connection of nation with religion that was motivating the freedom fighters to serve the cause of God by serving the cause of nation. In this line, Sri Aurobindo, in one of his speeches titled The Present Situation, delivered in Bombay on 19th January 1908, calls nationalism a religion, negating it as mere a political program. He says, you must remember that you are the instrument of God for the salvation of your own country. You must live as the instruments of God. Nationalism is not going to be crushed. Nationalism survives in the strength of God, and it is not possible to crush it. Whatever weapons are brought against it, nationalism is immortal. Nationalism cannot die because it is no human thing. Again, it's separate from this reading Sri Aurobindo. As Hinduism holds a central position in my discussion, let me disambiguate the word Hinduism used in this paper by making it clear that the word used here is synonymous with Sanatan Dharma, eternal religion that does not have any known founder or prophet, and also is not confined to any definition that one can call as all-encompassing for it. Though some often cited recent definitions exist which somehow tell us about some key features of the religion. What I am corroborating with is the definition of Hinduism given by Sri Aurobindo. We can call it definition, but basically he is giving some tenets of the religion. I am quoting him, that which we call the Hindu religion is really the eternal religion, because it is the universal religion which embraces all others. If a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. A narrow religion, a sectarian religion, and for a limited time and a limited purpose. This is the one religion that can triumph over materialism by including and anticipating the discoveries of science and the speculations of philosophy. It is the one religion which impresses on mankind the closeness of God to us and impresses in its compass all the possible means by which man can approach God. So we can see how religion and nationalism was linked by Sri Aurobindo. Bhagavad Gita also explains Hinduism. I am trying to talk a little about Hinduism, and then I will again shift my focus to nationalism and how Hinduism shaped this current face of India, how it contributed to this national conception or argument. Bal Gangadhar Tilak explains it as acceptance of the Vedas with reverence, recognition of the fact that means or ways to salvation are diverse, and the realization of the truth that number of gods to be worshipped is large. That indeed is the distinguishing feature of Hindu religion. One Supreme Court of India also laid a definition of Hinduism, emphasizing certain tenets of it in the following manner. I think I should skip it because I had prepared my presentation for Sir informed me that I am supposed to speak for 30 minutes only. So I will skip some part. Yeah, in my understanding, Hinduism, being the major religion of India, has created two simultaneous phases of its existence in the country, which I should like to address as modern India and contemporary India. For modern India, the seed was sown by Ram Mohan Roy in the 18th-19th century, who therefore is also known as the father of modern India. Modern India, as per the wishes of its exponent Ram Mohan Roy, still follows the European ideology to view the lives of Indians and following it to be like them. So to say, more rational and less traditional. This India does not have any faith in its root being Vedic and Sanskritic. It unintentionally, ignorantly, or unknowingly sees its fulfillment in European value system by following the path paved by its propounder. While on the other hand, contemporary India that has started asserting its existence more powerfully and emphatically these days by undoing what was done to it by the heralds of modern India in in the name of emancipation that actually caused greater damage to its long-lasting roots and value system. This India simultaneously was existing in the modern India recessively, most of the time through the biases of its key exponents like Ramakrishna Paramhams, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Dayanand Saraswati, Ramakrishna's disciple Swami Vivekananda, Professor Radha Krishnan, if we talk about, etc. So this India kept on asserting its being powerfully, and eventually we have today this contemporary India in existence because of the voices of these heralds. If we pay close attention to the development of the ideas of Ram Mohan Roy and Brahmo Samaj, we will find that as they moved forward, they went closer to Christianity. After Ram Mohan, the other significant figure conceded in his line was Devendranath, who emphasized a similar idea but in more emphatic manner. He was succeeded by another radical follower of Ram Mohan, about whose ideas and propositions Wilhelm Hapfast writes your soteriology that is no longer Indian, it comes closer to Christianity, which he considers to be the religion of humanity, the worship of humanity, than any other leader of the Brahmo Samaj. The true spirit of Sanatana Dharma was voiced in the ideas of Ramakrishna, who, though was a contemporary to Keshav Chandra Sen and makes mention of him at several places while talking about the religion, but severely criticized the Brahmo Samaj and its abstract program of reformation of the religion and the then society. The basic purpose behind this reformation and relating Hinduism with Christianity was not buying the animosity of the colonizers by opposing what they were asserting. Instead, they supported what they wanted from them. As fast, discussing about the idea of Hinduism put forth by Ramakrishna, writes, the value and richness of Hinduism cannot be reduced to the abstract purity of its pristine sources. Instead, it consists in its organic brutality, which Ramakrishna conceives in the sense of a non-historical inner perfection, the timeless of presence of Sanatana Dharma. Even without reform, Hinduism is prepared for the encounter with Christianity and other religions of the world. Its potential of experience and its inner diversity offered room enough for the inclusion and recognition of other names and forms of worship. Ramakrishna saw no problem in adding the worship of Jesus to the various cult forms of Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda, a disciple of Ramakrishna, who not only in India but also the biggest proclaimed philosophy of eternal religion, that in all its doctrines has single message throughout, that is harmony. Harmony of body with soul, harmony of material with spiritual, harmony of inner with outer, and outer with inner. Ramakrishna and his disciple, Swami Vivekananda, were actually the proclaimers of the idea of harmony of religions, being able to understand their own religion in its true spirit. It was with the emergence of Vivekananda as Swami Vivekananda, Vedanta was rejuvenated actually. Though Ramakrishna laid the foundation of reinvigorating the religious spirit in a limited area of Sanatana Dharma, yet Vivekananda took it to the largest arena and asserted its principal teachings along with the idea of harmony of religions purported by Vivekananda's ideas as conceded by him were basically from the Vedanta, Hinduism, which he used for encountering the West and making them understand and about the capacity of expression of Hinduism. He, learning the basics of religion and humanity from his guru, was inspired to represent Hinduism within and beyond the borders of his country, being the most invigorating agent of traditional Hinduism in contrast to the true self of the modern one that was represented and proposed by Ram Mohan and his followers like Keshav, where Christianization of Hinduism was to its benefit to be reformed. Vivekananda emerged as an agent of this jubilation of complete faith and trust in Hinduism proving what many of precedents, wrong. Under the influence, rulers' religion called for reform in the religion itself, considering the thought and philosophy as particular and less accommodative to other thoughts and beliefs. Swami Vivekananda was such a herald of Hinduism who devoted his life to this cause of self-assertion, and in place of creating some kind of gospel, shloka or granth for the purpose, he always referred to the original scriptures and Vedic treatises of Hinduism and lived on that he proclaimed and proposed for others to live. Now, let me shift my focus to the idea of Hindu nationalism. The 18th century, that was an age of enlightenment for Europe, also proved to be significant for India with regard to its unshackling from the prolonged slavery of darkness that actually had shackled its true spirit of knowledge and culture. Late 18th and early 20th century witnessed the emergence of some key exponents of contemporary India who were traditionalists to the core and never submitted to the false westernized outlooks towards their nation. B.G. Gokhale, in his article Swami Vivekananda and Indian Nationalism, says that the study of Indian nationalism has revealed that four nationalistic schools were operative during the period of 19th century, namely secularly oriented Western type nationalism of men like Dadabhai Naoroji and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the Hindu nationalism of such leaders as Swami Dayanand Saraswati and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, the Muslim nationalism of Sayyid Ahmad Khan and the poet Muhammad Iqbal, and the regional nationalism so dominant in Bengal and Maharashtra. It was during this period of late 19th century when Hindu nationalism was gaining prominence with the idea and activities of people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda and their followers, who were striving to save the true spirit of the nation by turning the face away from the Western influences and making the countrymen realize the strength of their culture and religion through their publications and public speeches. In Maharashtra, religious and nationalist spirits was very much apparent from the motivated sponsored celebrations of Ganesh and Shivaji festivals. It was during this period only when translations of Hindu scriptures by the Western scholars began to appear with high regards. This too motivated the supporters of Hindu nationalism to a large extent. G.P. Gokhale writes, these Hindu reformers played a crucial role in giving the present shape to India, also by preserving it from the Christian missionaries who had primarily come to India for Christian and spices have fast rights. But the influence of reformers of traditional Hinduism despised other religions or philosophy. Rather, they were equally conversant with Western philosophy like Ram Mohan Roy. But this knowledge of other tradition helped them understand their own existence in a better and clearer manner, to have confidence in their existence as Hindu and giving equal respect to the other religions. Vivekananda, unlike Ram Mohan Roy and his other dissidents, who submitting their knowledge, understanding of the religion to Christianity, were ready to be reformed from what they basically were not able to assimilate in them fully due to certain factors which affected them. Swami Vivekananda, in his reply to the address of welcome in the year 1897, writes, great works, I'm quoting him, great works are to be done. Wonderful powers have to be worked out. We have to teach other nations many things. This is the motherland of philosophy, of spirituality, and of ethics, of sweetness, gentleness, and love, and make the bold statement that India is still first and foremost of all the nations of the world in these respects. Let others talk of politics, of the glory of acquisition of immense wealth poured in by trade, of the power and spread of commercialism, of the glorious fountain of physical liberty, but these the Hindu mind does not understand and does not want to understand. Touch him on spirituality, on religion, on God, on the soul, on the infinite, on the spiritual freedom. And I assure you, the lowest peasant in India is better informed on these subjects than many philosophers. I have said, gentlemen, that we have yet something to teach the world. This is the very reason, dear, that this nation has lived on in spite of hundreds of years of persecution, in spite of nearly 1,000 years of foreign rule and foreign oppression. These lines also show us the very ground on which the idea of harmony of religions was extracted. To offer or to foster such harmony, one has to have complete faith, trust in one's own religion. Simultaneously, it is required to understand other religions and religious ideas to provide a kind of coexistence environment by having an approach like Ramakrishna, as per his idea of Sarvadharma Sambhav, places himself at the place, the practitioner of the other religion, and then opines about that religion. Vivekananda, his disciple, very emphatically proclaimed the idea of toleration as a key idea of Hinduism and the nation. He, citing the Rigveda hymn, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti, means that which is one, the sages speak of as manifold, or can say that the God is one, sages perceive or him variously. I have to skip. Okay, so just last 1 minute I'm going to use. These attempts also popularized this language in which scriptures were written, and basically we can assert here, or we can say, looking at what I presented before, so that in the conception of the India as a nation, Hinduism has played a seminal role. In the absence of aforementioned Hindu nationalists, the country would have lost its true spirit that distinguishes it from any other nation in the world. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for skipping the last part of the paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. And India is a land of philosophy, and the philosophical values have to be taught to the world and also to our own people. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And dear participants, do you have any questions to be asked, or do you have any clarifications to be made?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm available for any question or comments.
Sir, you are maybe chairman. The chairman has to say a few words.
Thank you.
Talk about Hinduism and in the modern context, contemporary India, and then you talked about you linked Hinduism with God, which in the days of controversies among the scholars and participants. But anyway, you finally recommended that without Hinduism, Hindu nationalists, India would have not then you answer. But then you made a good paper. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we shall end the session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Go to the next session. Dr. Bhaskar. I'll chair.